this evening.
The first order of business is to rise so that we can pledge allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Some days it's tough to remember that it's our flag, all of our flags. But we want to emphasize that here. I want to thank everybody for coming. As Joanne said, I'm Suzanne Berger. I am the chair, I forgot for a moment, of the Westchester County Democratic Committee. I live in the neighboring town just to your south in Greenberg. And we have had several forums to introduce our stellar candidates to the voters of CD17. We have posted them on our YouTube channel, Westchester County Democratic and once this is concluded, within a few days, we'll have this one and the prior one sponsored by the Mount Pleasant Dems posted as well. It's so important to have an informed electorate. We are the opinion leaders. We are the ones who talk to our neighbors, our friends, the people we meet at the grocery store. I hope we all still do our shopping sometimes in person. And at the park, when we're out walking our dogs, all that, to say, these are the candidates we've spoken to, and we think they're all great, or we prefer this one or that one. And so as we move towards our June primary, we can begin to make an informed decision as to who will beat Mike Lawler and return this seat to the blue column, which is, hopefully everybody's interest, both on the candidate side and the voter side. And that's what we're here to do, to try to assess the different candidates' bona fides and ability to make that, I was gonna say dream, but it's not a dream, make that reality come true. So thank you very much. I'm here to listen as well. And I'm turning the microphone back to Joanne Saul, the chair of the Mount Pleasant Democratic.
Thank you, Suzanne. Welcome everybody this evening. Thank you so much for coming out for this important event. And to those of you on Zoom, thank you for taking the time as well. I'm going to go over quickly what the format for this evening is so everybody understands what to expect. We are seeing each candidate separately for approximately 30 minutes. For approximately 30 minutes. And we will be presenting questions to them, and they'll have an opportunity to answer them, obviously, for 2 minutes. Their opening statements will be 2.5 minutes, and their closing statements will be 2.5 minutes. Right now we have Mike Sachs, so thank you for being here. And I'm going to let Francesca give the good word.
I have to do the heavy lifting. Hi, I'm Francesca Haggard, Vice Chair. I'm going to ask everyone to silence their phones. Please, there is absolutely no recording on a phone of this event, nor photographs allowed to be taken. This will be posted, and we will notify you about its posting after both of these are completed. Tonight, this is the last one, but I'm really, we will walk up to you and say, no photographs, put away your phone, please, whatever. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so on that note, you can start with your opening statement, which is 2.5 minutes.
Thank you all for being here. Mount Pleasant Democratic Committee, thank you guys. Westchester Democratic Party, thank you. My name is Mike Sachs. I'm a dad of 2 young boys in Croton-on-Hudson, and I'm running for Congress to fight for their future, fight for our district, fight for our democracy, and fight for everything that Mike Lawler and his fellow MAGA extremists have abandoned. Now, there are 7 of us in this primary race, and almost all of us can say the same thing. What I bring to this race is an understanding of how we got to this point. this uniquely anti-democratic moment. Because I kind of had a front row seat to a lot of it happen. I'm not a politician. I'm a lawyer, a journalist, former political and legal reporter. I covered the Supreme Court, covered Congress, covered the 2016 elections, covered the first Trump administration, the early Biden administration. So really, I had a front row seat in Citizens United. I was on the air on January 6th. I've got a unique line of sight to how we got to this point. I can tell you what I saw when I was covering what was in front of us and behind the scenes. For too long, for decades, we let our policies be oriented toward billionaires, towards special interests, towards elites, while leaving the rest of us, we the people, behind. But now, it's pretty awesome. We're seeing people show up. Thank you for being here. People stand up, take to the streets. Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. with the Subway sandwich thrower. New York City, Chicago, saying, this is not who we are, this is not what we are about. And this campaign is never to be a movement to meet this moment. It's not just about unseating Mike Waller, though beat him we must. He's a symptom of a bigger problem. We have to send a message that we must reorient our politics and our policies back to we the people. Return the House of Representatives to the people's house. I welcome your questions. Look at that, right on time, right? Welcome your questions. I've got a lot to say about this. I'm sure you guys do as well. Thanks for being here.
Okay, I have the honor of asking the first question, but I just want to get Brian's attention. Can you close the door? It's noisy. We'll read it. All right, question number one.
Yes.
Tariffs on imported goods from building materials to consumer products can drive up costs for families and small businesses. What is your position on current U.S. tariff policies, and how would you balance trade protections with the need to keep everyday goods affordable for your constituents?
Your repeal trumps tariffs. Straight up. They're arbitrary, they're capricious, they're illegal, no matter what the Supreme Court says. And you realize that what he is doing is passing on the cost of his own arbitrary scattershot negotiation efforts onto the people. You remember in the 2024 election, Trump and Waller would say they're going to lower our prices. Cost of living is too high. Prices of eggs are too high. What have they done since? Are costs lower? They're not. Going higher. So they're just telling me that the price of lumber is up 14% because of the tariffs, or rather that caused costs of housing to go up 14%. And a friend of mine who's an interior designer today asked me, because her clients are saying, do we need to buy our products right now because of Trump's new tariffs? These things are affecting people every single day. They've lied to us about lowering the cost of our living. So to jack prices up, make themselves and their billionaire backers richer, to keep themselves in power forever. Now I'm running not just about affordability, but about fighting autocracy. And these two things are directly connected. The very interests that want these tariffs, the very interests that want to steal from our vulnerable to pay for their own tax cuts are the same ones that have bought Lawler's seat, that have bought our senators, that have bought our Supreme Court, that have bought Trump. And they have no interest in letting go of power now that they have it. So we need to understand, as we're making our way towards 2026, the people we talk to, the people whose doors we knock on, we need to make that connection, make them see and understand that they have been betrayed by the people that they thought would protect them. We are not here to hurt, we are here to help. We are not here to tank the economy, we're here to make the economy prosper. We're not here to distort our democracy. We are here to make sure every person can vote.
Next question.
Yes.
Indian Point closed in 2021, leaving behind major infrastructure and economic potential. There are proposals to restart nuclear operations, introduce small modular reactors, or build large-scale battery storage. As our next representative, how would you approach the future of this site to ensure community safety, environmental integrity, and long-term economic benefit?
I live right downriver from Indian Point. My son's bar mitzvah will be right next to it, perhaps, in a year, and 3 days ago. So I understand the impact that having this nuclear site has had on our communities. For a long time, people talk about nuclear being, clean, forever energy. But then what do you do with the waste? Where does it go? What's happening in the Hudson River right near it? So Indian Point needs to stay shut down as a nuclear site, as a nuclear power plant. But we could put renewables there. We could have large-scale batteries. We could have solar. We could use that site to fulfill the energy needs of our entire community. Cheap, renewable energy, environmentally protective energy. And in the Congress, we need to make sure that we're able to put back into place the tax credits that the big ugly bill stripped away from people who are looking to move on towards renewable energy, both consumers and producers. Move away from dirty energy towards environmentally protective, sustainable energy. And it's an opportunity. The federal government's job is to make sure it facilitates funding that type of development and makes a paradigm shift towards how we as consumers are able to keep our planet well preserved, keep our children healthy, clean air and clean water, and keep our pocketbooks pretty well lined while not handing over more and more money to the fossil fuel industry, while not handing over more money to those who keep wanting to pollute our country and our world. We can lead. We in this country, lead in this world, right here at the Indian Point site. We have the political imagination, the will to do so.
Thank you. Okay, question 3. What have you done to help Democratic candidates in CD 17 or elsewhere to win in 2024, 2023, and 2022?
So in 2022, I was still a journalist. So it would have been improper for me to be out there canvassing for different candidates. In 2024, I was working in advocacy, progressive court reform advocacy. Mondaire Jones, if you remember, was before the bill when he was in the Congress to recognize the current threat that we have from our Supreme Court. It was evident in 2020 to those of us who were really paying attention. And so the advocacy work I did on the national level, I'd like to think plays downstream towards affecting change here in our district. Now, we can win in 2024. We have to win in 2026. I see Joe Bonanno just showed up back there. Hey, Joe. We have to win in 2025 too. And I was out canvassing for Joe about a month ago, walking door to door, helping him out. You're door to door every day. You seem like you're out there. Yeah. And those of us who are candidates, if we could clone ourselves, we would, so that we canvass for everybody all the time on both sides of the river and up throughout the counties. But I'm hoping over the next, 35 days? 35, did I get that right? 35 days?
36.
36, all right. That I and the other candidates will be out there in full force to make sure that our candidates in 2025 are able to win. But we'll start putting momentum towards 2026 to beat ball.
Thank you. With the federal government facing a funding deadline at midnight on September 30th, a failure to pass a continuing resolution could result in a government shutdown. Such a shutdown directly affects federal workers, some of whom the president is threatening to fire permanently, and disrupts services used by the public, from national parks to social programs and government processing. How would you vote on this issue? And how would you explain your decision to the workers and everyday citizens impacted by a potential shutdown or a continuing resolution?
Republicans control all three branches of government. They control the House, they control the Senate, and they control the president. If they want to pass their bill to keep open this fascist government, they can do it on their own. The firing of federal workers that Office of Management and Budget Director Russ Vought has threatened to fire, he's going to do that anyway. The stripping of funding of our social services and our agencies and environmental protection, he was going to do that anyway. The Supreme Court was going to bless all of that anyway. A shutdown is a political event as much as it is an everyday event. I think a lot of the federal workers right now in DC and throughout the country recognize what's happening at this moment. This is not a shutdown that we've seen in the past that Republicans have threatened because they wanted to defund Obamacare. This shutdown would be on the basis of making sure that we wield our power and our leverage and our voice to make this current regime back down on its autocratic moves. We can use this moment politically as a referendum on the Trump administration. They can lie, but we also need to recognize that, look, the polls, Trump is underwater across the board. When he is in power, when Republicans hold power, when they have unified government, they are unpopular. People do not like them because they're getting hurt and their wallets are getting robbed. If they want to compete with us on who's going to have the upper hand on a government shutdown, be our guests.
Thanks. Question number 5 is, Russia's war in Ukraine continues to reshape global security. NATO has pledged long-term support while also facing pressure to maintain unity and deterrence. As our next representative, how would you approach U.S. involvement in NATO and support for Ukraine? And what principles would guide your decisions on military aid, alliance commitments, and diplomacy?
Full support for Ukraine. Full support for NATO. Full support for diplomacy. And full leadership for the United States, a restoration of leadership of the United States, of the free world against the axis of autocracy rising throughout the world. This isn't a hard question. For those with a moral compass, for those with a commitment to American democracy and leadership, those with a commitment to human rights, not a hard question. Trump has made it a political issue that it never was before, simply because of his venality and inability to side with the good guys. Although he just did this weird flip-flop at the UN, right? Zelensky must have whispered something talismanic this year. I'm sure he won't keep to that promise. But no, we need to support Ukraine. We need to make sure Russia doesn't continue its aggression. We need to give the entire world an understanding that this country can once again be the beacon of hope and freedom that emerged as in the 20th century.
Thank you. How much have you raised in support of your campaign? And how much of that amount has been self-funded?
No self-funding. I've raised this date probably almost $300,000. Not from my pocket, but from my personal networks. I recognize that I have been outraised by several competitors in this district. That's okay. Because what I think when it comes to these races, especially this time around, is that what will win from general election will be the ability to catch fire, send a message that meets this moment, and captures the imagination not just the people in this district, but people around the country who will want to then contribute to this campaign, not just with their money, but with their boots on the ground and knock every door possible. And whoever wins this primary is going to get so much money to compete with Lawler. And we can also use Lawler's money against him. Think about it. Where's his money coming from? All of his perceived strengths may also be weaknesses in this current political environment.
Okay, this is your particular question
Okay.
here. Okay. You've covered the Supreme Court and exposed MAGA-aligned policies. How will you translate that watchdog role into legislative impact?
Okay, this is 2 minutes might not do this justice. Truly. Right. But come January 3rd, 2027, the House of Representatives will probably be the only chamber of the only branch of the federal government that we Democrats can control. So how can we use that chamber to its greatest leverage? What does the House have in spades? Oversight power, subpoena power. We can put on a show. There will by then be 2 years of members of the Trump administration and their allies hurting us, stealing from us. The criminals, the corrupt, the incompetents, the clowns, TGIF, Trump's goons and whatever, to be Monday through Friday primetime clippable programming for Oversight Committee. All the while, we come forward, because we can't just be against somebody, we come forward with our own one big beautiful bill. Voting rights restoration and strengthening, reproductive rights strengthening and restoration, environmental protections, strengthening of our social safety net, comprehensive immigration reform, everything. All the stuff that Democrats do that help people and don't hurt people and make our economy better instead of tanking it and strengthen our democracy instead of distorting it. We put that all together on one big beautiful bill. We send it to the Senate. The Senate kills it. What do we do then? We unite the bad guys we brought before the cameras and the senators who they've bought or who bowed down to them and say, those guys are working together to hurt you. They're working together to lie to you. And instead, when it dies, instead of shutting up and waiting until the next congressional session, no, we keep going every single day. We get out there on the Senate, on the House floor, we get out there on the socials, we get out there on TV, we get out there on the streamings, we don't shut up. And we ride our way to the next election on the backs of the power of the popularity of what we're presenting. Because Democratic proposals are historically popular. Republicans think they'll save Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, when they really want to defund it and repeal it. That's how popular it is. Thank you. We can have confidence in what we stand for, put it to the public, and have confidence that those who are backing Republicans are true villains. We can win on that.
Thank you. Okay, Mike Lola has launched an aggressive social media campaign promoting the budget bills provisions, including imposing work requirements on Medicaid recipients, barring undocumented immigrants from ripping off New York taxpayers, increasing the child tax credit and eliminating Social Security taxes for many, framed as a way to address affordability concerns. How will your campaign strategically and decisively counter this narrative to expose its flaws and offer voters a compelling alternative?
Dude puts $100, takes $100 away from us and puts pennies back in our pockets and says, I'm helping you. We can get all our pie charts and our specifics and well actually and all the numbers, but ultimately it comes down to is there's $100 he's stolen from you, given to the people who paid for his own elections and his lies, and puts pennies back in your pocket and says, look, vote for me, look how I'm helping you. That's messed up, and it's easy to communicate that. Easy to communicate that. This guy's out here been saying up is down, down is up. He went on CNN saying GDP is up and CPI is down, when the exact opposite was true. You can say, this man thinks down is up and up is down, is trying to sell that to you. When he puts on an ad on streaming or on YouTube or on TV, with a bunch of people lying to you, we can put one on right after him saying, that guy just lied to you. We can be quick, simple, impactful, and recognize that those policies he backs, when he goes out and says, I'm here to help this woman who got put into ICE detention illegally, we can recognize also that that's the one person that he thought was politically convenient for him when he has been part of voting for the apparatus that's sending masked guards into our streets, stealing people away in indefinite detention for third countries. And he's not doing anything for them. Same theme. Steals $100 from you, puts pennies back in your pocket, says, I'm helping. Look how good I am. We're putting forward things that can help people. We're looking to get rid of this regime that he is part of propping up. And by 2026, every single day, right, we're seeing it every single day. People getting hurt, and the corruption, and the crime. And with every single day, more people will see it beyond this circle of very good Democrats in this room. And it'll be our job as a campaign to send that message along too. And not just say, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Thank you. Our country has to do plenty for us to make things more affordable. And for us to be able to make that happen for you guys, we need you to save our country. That's the pitch to voters this time around. We're here to help. We need your help too.
Okay, last question. Student loan debt continues to burden millions of Americans, affecting economic mobility and delaying major life decisions. What specific federal policies will you support or introduce to help reduce this debt and make higher education more affordable going forward?
Yeah. So remember the Supreme Court canceled or struck down the Biden administration's student loan relief? This gets to the very core of why I'm running for Congress. To help people by reorienting our policies back to the people in the people's house. For too long, we have relied on the pen and the vote of the president and the Supreme Court to save us, when none of them are doing any good anymore. We, the people, have power. In that big, beautiful bill that I'm talking about, there will be student loan relief. And it'll be an act of Congress. It'll be a message to ensure that people understand this is an act of fairness, not an act of pulling up the ladder. You know, some people say, well, I just didn't pay my student loan, so why shouldn't someone else have to? Well, yeah, I mean, someone had to get polio. No, people don't get polio now. We can pitch this as a matter of fairness, as a matter of good policy. And then we can make it law by winning successive elections so that then we do have control of Congress, we do have the presidency, and we dare the Supreme Court to strike it down like they did the Biden regulation. But this time they're doing it against the people, against an act of Congress. If the Supreme Court says, no, we're going to strike that down because it's not our policy view, and by then, Congress will have asserted its power and understood that first branch. People will see that it's the first branch. And maybe we'll recognize that we'll have to do something about the Supreme Court too.
Now it's time for your closing statement.
Well, thank you guys for listening. I was weird answering questions about applause at the end, but I appreciate your respectful listening. So right now, right, we have this Congress that isn't the people's house. It sits quietly by while we have a would-be autocrat in the White House and 6 unelected partisan operatives on the Supreme Court, jockeying for power to disempower and hurt the rest of us. And when they do feel like lifting a finger, Congress, the Republican controlled Congress that Waller is one of the key votes for, what do? Well, they hurt the vulnerable and steal from virtually all Americans, so to enrich those who don't need any more money. And then sometimes they cheer on this administration. What does Waller do? Cheers on the tariffs. Cheers on, urges on federal agents coming to New York City. Cheers on murdering people on the high seas. And yes, cheers on the destruction of the Voting Rights Act and the ripping away reproductive freedom from women around the country. So we don't get out of this moment by saying the same kinds of things with the same kinds of people. We don't do that. It won't work. I'm running for Congress because I'm clear-eyed about the structural issues this current moment presents. and that we need to build a new house that stands for all of us. We can't be out here on the campaign trail promising a bunch of nice things, rights restoration, freedom restoration, entitlement reform, whatever, strengthening. No, we can't. And then the moment we get into office and it dies, we just give up when the billionaire-backed system designed to block us does just that. No, that's how we lose voters. That's how we lose elections. We need to show the people every single day that we stand for them. We need to build a new house out of the rubble of the wreckage that Trump and Lawler will have left us. That's what this campaign's about. This is why I stand here before you. I hope for your support. I'm really happy you're here this evening. Great number of choices before you. Embarrassment of riches. And I'm proud to be on the campaign trail. Everyone here will be speaking before you, and everyone else will listen to you as well. Thanks for being here.
Cait Conley. I'm going to just go over the process again so that she's reminded of what we're doing. And so you will have 2.5 minutes for an opening statement. You'll be given a 30-second warning and then a stop sign. You will have 2 minutes to answer each of the questions, and then after the questions, you will have another 2.5 minutes for a closing statement. So on that note, we will start. Oh,
Yes, I'm reminding, I have to say, we did that first to silence your phones. Right, okay, no photographs, no recording. Anybody new come in? Can't do it. Okay, I get to ask question number 1, Cait.
No.
Cait.
Opening statement. Sorry.
Da-da-da-da.
I'm gonna go with whatever.
Thank you.
At this point, whatever you guys wanna do. It's Monday night, what makes it fun?
Why don't you start with an opening statement?
Well, first and foremost, thank you all for doing this. And thank you all for being here tonight. Because I think most importantly, what we are all showing is that caring about America and the future of this country and our democracy is not enough. This is about action. Just as generations before us have been called upon to deal with challenging times in our nation's history, this time is no different. And this is our generation, our time's moment to step up and answer that call. My name is Cait Conley. I am a proud daughter of the Hudson Valley Army combat vet. I come from a family that's as blue collar as it gets. My grandfather and great grandfather worked in the brickyards outside of Montrose. My mom's with the U.S. Postal Service for 48 years. We have walked in service every part of the Hudson Valley, from Elmsford to Wappingers Falls to you name it on the west side, Sullivan County, Ulster, Orange, all the way down Rockland. I have seen the Hudson Valley and the incredible community and the sense of American values and community values that we bring to bear. And it was those values that my family instilled in me, fighting for what we believe in, standing up for what is right, that led me after 9/11 to go to West Point. I graduated from West Point, went off to the Army, where I served 16 years, 6 deployments overseas, went to combat zones like Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, to fight and defend for this country that I love so much. And I think that is what this is all about. This is about fighting and defending the country that we love. And I will tell you that feeling, that calling I felt after 9/11 to raise my hand and go off to West Point, it was the same calling and responsibility I felt when I saw this party, the Democratic Party that I love, and this country that I love so much, suffer in November from political division and polarization that is unprecedented in our lifetime. And I felt the call to do something, to fight for the country that I love. And I'm telling you, I'm doing this most importantly out of love and a belief that our best days as a nation are still ahead of us. But we have a lot of work to do to get there. And I do believe that politicians on both sides got us into this mess. And they're not going to be the ones to get us out of it. And folks like Mike Lawler have wasted their opportunity to try to demonstrate that they were public servants. Instead, we saw what matters to him, his own political ambitions. Where I come from as a public servant, when you put yourself over others, you get fired. And so that's what I'm setting out to do, to make sure Mike Lawler goes packing and we have representation that the Hudson Valley and our families deserve for a better future. So welcome questions, discussions, and time tonight.
And now I get to ask the first question. Thank you. Tariffs on imported goods, from building materials to consumer products, can drive up costs for families and small businesses. What is your position on U.S. tariff policies, and how would you balance trade protections with the need to keep everyday goods affordable for your constituents?
The recklessness with which we see this administration approaching tariffs is exactly the opposite of how they were intended to be used. Tariffs as an effective economic tool were intended to be used as a scalpel. Instead, what we see with this administration and what Lawler is allowing them to do is them being used like a sledgehammer, where all they are doing is making it harder for American families already faced with inflation to put food on the table, a roof over their heads, and pay their electric bills. That is wrong. Mike Lawler is wrong. Congress is wrong, because it is their responsibility to implement and oversee tariffs. And they have ceded that to Trump, not for true national security benefit or economic outcome, but for his own political ambition and self-interest. So he and his cronies can make millions, billions, and that is wrong. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce this summer put out a statement saying that in 2027, the average cost of building a home in the United States is going to go up $14,000 alone from the tariffs that we implemented on Canada. It is already a housing crisis here in the Hudson Valley. Trump has made that harder. Lawler has enabled and allowed that. Lawler has made it harder for our families to buy affordable homes or to build them. And this authority that Trump is using to implement these executive order-based tariff policies through a national security cutout provision. I'm sorry, I just failed to see where Canadian timber is a national security threat. This isn't what this is about, and that is wrong. If you want to stimulate economic opportunity and manufacturing here in the United States, then find ways to do that. But these tariffs are doing nothing but driving up prices on American families. He hasn't set a base to enable manufacturing here in the United States to supplement and to offset these shuts or the cuts. Instead, you see the American people having to pay more for daily goods. We just saw it last week with prescription prices. Like, this is insanity. That's why it has to stop. I might borrow that sign.
Indian Point closed in 2021, leaving behind major infrastructure and economic potential. There are proposals to restart nuclear operations, introduce small molecular reactors, or build large-scale battery storage. As our next representative, how would you approach the future of this site to ensure community safety, environmental integrity, and long-term economic benefit?
Indian Point was built on an understanding of nuclear technology from the 1940s, right? Construction began in the 1950s. When it was shut, it was largely done out of safety, security, environmental reasons. We're incredibly valid. And we're still not resolved completely. We still have further to go in the safe remediation of some of the leftover nuclear waste, right? And the dirty water. So that is a job that is undone that we must finish. But I think it is really important that we also identify this was shut down without a plan to augment existing electricity and power to the Hudson Valley in New York. Well, just look at the differences in dependency. We went from 64% dependence on fossil fuels to 93 since the shutdown. And every single person in here is living in an area where you have an energy provider that is seeking double-digit rate increases, whether it's Central Hudson, Con Ed, or NYSEG. The reality is, ladies and gentlemen, the energy demand that our nation has is going up and growing. To power the technological future, especially an AI-driven technological future, we do not have enough energy to meet those needs. We also don't have enough energy to offset some of the impacts of climate change and extreme weather. We need more energy, but we have to do it responsibly. We have to do it cleanly. We have to do it effectively and safely. And so I think it's very important that we don't fail to address the fact that we cannot continue with what we have. And I will tell you, a major focus that I have is on how do we bring energy production back to the Hudson Valley in a way that it is affordable and creates job opportunities. Solar, wind, geothermal, this is the future. Nuclear in some places too will be. I'm not saying here. But how do we create job opportunities that are connected to this and help homes here in the Hudson Valley be more energy independent? And I think that is something we have to focus on.
Thank you. What have you done to help Democratic candidates in CD 17 or elsewhere to win in 2024, 23, and 22?
So I would say that I fought to make sure we have democracy in all of those years and to make sure it stayed true. Look, I am very proud of my time in uniform, where I fought for this nation that I love so much. And I will tell you, I would love to have moved back to Bedford instead of Baghdad, but I went where this country needed me to go, and I always will. But I will tell you what I'm very proud of is, so since 2016, on the Russian interference with our presidential election, I have led election security efforts around this country to help ensure the cybersecurity resilience of our nation's election infrastructure. I led something called the Defending Digital Democracy Project back from 2017, 2018, focused on helping election officials across the country, to include here, understand how cybersecurity could jeopardize the integrity or security of the elections process. And last year, at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, I led the federal government's election security mission for 2024. Whether it was countering Russian disinformation that was trying to undermine the security and integrity of our elections process and stoke partisan discord, or whether it was making sure that Russian-backed cyber criminal groups couldn't lock up election offices in the lead to election day or on election day. I also worked with election officials around this country. To include, we had an incident in Dutchess County, New York, where we had suspicious mailings, to include some that were fentanyl laced, sent to election officials to threaten and intimidate. So I would say I have spent my entire life fighting and making sure that regardless who was on the ballot here in New York, they had safe, secure elections where the American people could have confidence in the outcome.
Thank you. With the federal government facing a funding deadline at midnight on September 30, a failure to pass the continuing resolution could result in a governmental shutdown. Such a shutdown directly affects federal workers, some of whom the president is threatening to fire permanently, and disrupts service used by the public, from national parks to social programs and government processing. How would you vote on this issue? And how would you explain your decision to the workers and everyday citizens impacted by a potential shutdown or continuing resolution?
So I've spent my entire adult life until January this year in federal service, in uniform, and the last 2 years out. So when I tell you I have seen this story play out time and time again in various forms, to include sequestration, if folks remember that. What I have never had the stomach for is watching politicians use critical government functions as political pawns and tools in advancing a partisan agenda. There are some things that should transcend partisan politics, and the basic government services should be one of them. We must negotiate to make sure that the critical protections that Americans have paid for and earned, right? Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, these are things that Americans deserve and are entitled to. That those critical things continue. And what I'm really upset about is the fact that the Republican Party and the recently passed budget bill pursued such significant cuts at these core programs to justify tax cuts for billionaires at the expense of working Americans around this country, to include right here in the district. A government shutdown is bad for America, period. Continuing resolution should not even be enough. We should be passing real budget bills that look forward, not just backward. But what we are seeing, this is a symptom of the root issue, which is a dysfunctional Congress that can't get its act together. And this isn't new. I've gone through these drills for the last several years. We have to do better. Why people are losing confidence in American democracy is because of stuff like this, where we can't get the basics done. Government shutdowns make Americans less secure. It makes it harder for Americans to get basic services that they are entitled to. That is not in any.
Russia's war in Ukraine continues to reshape global security. NATO has pledged long-term support while also facing pressure to maintain unity and deterrence. As our next representative, how would you approach U.S. involvement in NATO and support for Ukraine? And what principles would guide your decisions on military aid, alliance commitments, and diplomacy?
We need to be very clear-eyed. Vladimir Putin does not want America to succeed. He actively does everything and anything he can do to diminish America's national security priorities and undercut what we hold dear here in America. I told you about these election security efforts that I led. Look, Russia's #1 goal in their disinformation efforts for the last 10 years, where they have fake stuff coming out on social media, they've got fake videos coming out, right? Heck, even last year, they went so far as to manufacture fake websites that look like real websites, like Fox News and the New York Times, to spew lies. And they have 2 goals: to stoke partisan discord and to undermine the American public's confidence in our institutions. We have seen Russian-backed cyber groups hold American critical infrastructure, to include hospitals, in jeopardy under ransomware attacks. Russia is not our ally. They're our adversary. And I've spent the last 10 years leading efforts in uniform and out to counter them, to the point where, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but Russia came out a few years ago with the top 500 Americans banned from Russia list. I'm on it. Thank you. I actually wanted to frame it. It's like President Obama, right? Jake Sullivan, Stephen Colbert, Cait Conley. And so this goes back to the seriousness of what we're dealing with. We can't fall for Russia's lies. We need to support Ukraine. It is a core democracy in this world that is pushing back against an illegal invasion into their sovereign territory. They are a democratic country fighting for their own sovereignty. We have a responsibility to make sure that Putin doesn't think he has a green light to do it there or anywhere in the world. Because if you think he'll stop there, he won't.
How much have you raised in support of your campaign? And how much of that amount has been self-funded?
So if you can imagine, as a lifelong public servant, I haven't made millions of dollars. I hope one day, maybe. But the reality is, I don't have that. So what I have put in is the maximum individual contribution that you can, $7,000. And I welcome if anyone wants to contribute to the campaign. Our deadline is tomorrow night. I will tell you that last quarter was the first full quarter of this campaign, and I raised $480,000 fundraising. I outraised the rest of this field. The next closest person was 130,000 behind me, and that's my first time ever running a campaign, my first full quarter. I was the 9th highest raising Democratic challenger in the country. This is going to be a hard fight. Mike Lawler is fundraising from every corner of this country. He walked out of a dinner with Speaker Johnson in June with a check for $210,000 in one night. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to need all of the ammunition and means possible to fight and win. And I think just as my responsibility as your representative would be to bring resources back to this district, I'm telling you, I'm fighting every day to do that for this race too, because it is going to take that in order to beat him. So tomorrow night at midnight is the official closing of this FEC quarter. So we'll be publishing our race standards, but I will tell you, I'm working hard every day to make sure we have the means to beat Mike Lawler. And it is going to be hard, full stop. And I will tell you, there's a lot of competitive districts in this country that have a smaller margin of loss than what we had last year. And so make no mistake, we are not going to get some magic load of money at the end of this. We have to fight for every dollar. And this goes back to why I think it matters that you have someone now who can fight and deliver. Because if we can't do it now, we're not going to be able to do it next year. Right.
Okay, Mike Lawler has launched an aggressive social media campaign promoting the budget bill provisions, including imposing work requirements on Medicaid recipients, barring undocumented immigrants from ripping off New York taxpayers, increasing the child tax credit, and eliminating Social Security taxes for many framed as a way to address affordability concerns. How would your campaign strategically and decisively counter this narrative to expose its flaws and offer voters a compelling alternative?
I think there is one very important question that we have to ask everyone. Since Mike Lawler has been elected in November of 2022, how has Mike Lawler made it easier or more affordable for you to put food on the table, keep a roof over your head, pay your electric bill, or give your kids a better future? What he is touting as these short-term immediate wins to placate voters and get some type of PR stunt is certainly not the same as building a better America or a better future. I'll tell you why he's failing or how he is failing. For the first time in modern American history, the economic prospects of younger Americans are worse than that of their parents or grandparents. What is a bigger sign of failure than that? The American dream doesn't feel real for too many families here in the Hudson Valley. That is failing. When we look at the recent college graduate unemployment rate, it exceeded the national average this summer. And we're about to see a level of displacement in our workforce by technology and productivity changes that we're not prepared for. We have real problems. Mike Lawler is about sound bites, not solving things. So let's not confuse the things that he touts as actual wins as a mask for his failures to make any life, any family's life here in the Hudson Valley actually better. When he talks about SALT, don't you dare let him get away with the fact that he had any win. Let's say what SALT really is. Since the establishment of the federal income tax, we went 114 years without there being a cap on state and local tax deductions. And in 2017, the GOP deliberately implemented the SALT cap to punish California and New York, blue states. It was going to end this year. Mike Lawler made it permanent. That's not a gift. He made a permanent tax raise on New Yorkers to advance his own political agenda and ambition. That is failure, Mike.
Thank you. You've served in combat zones and advised the White House on counterterrorism. How will you translate that experience into trust with suburban voters focused on affordability and healthcare.
I think it's about somebody who's willing to do the hard work and solve problems. I think what people are sick of is people who admire problems and recognize them, but don't fix them. I'll tell you, I spent the last 4 years working between my time at the White House and then at CISA with members of Congress, with committees. I've written federal legislation. I've overseen and implemented national budgets. While yes, I'm very proud of my service in uniform, I promise you, what I have done and delivered for this nation goes far beyond that. I worked on securing our nation's critical infrastructure and building it to be more resilient. Things that this district needs desperately. And I know how to make Congress work and what the federal government's job is supposed to be. So when it comes to who can get out there on day one and sprint for you in January of 27, I'm ready. I am ready to go. And I will tell you, we do not have time for on-the-job training. We have to get in there and stop the bleeding. We got to make sure tens of thousands of people in this district don't lose Medicaid coverage. We've got to make sure they roll back harmful provisions on tariffs that are jacking up prescription prices. There is so much harm that we don't have time to waste that we must get after. So I would argue, my life, while I never planned on running for Congress, has made me your best athlete to get in there and kick some ass. And so that's what I want to do for you. And I will tell you what I do have experience in is solving hard problems when the stakes could not be higher. What I have been called upon time and time again in my career is to go where people think things can't get done and get it done. And I am incredibly proud of that. I'm here to work for you. I take public service seriously. And I think part of what's wrong in Congress right now, we have too many politicians and not enough leaders and true public servants.
Okay, and now it is your opportunity for a closing statement.
Oh, that was fast. I mean, I'm just grateful for the time with you all tonight. At the end of the day, this is about building trust with people, right? This is about when someone walks in to the booth on election day and they're looking at their ballot, all they get to see is your name. They don't see anything else. What does your name represent to them? You're hoping that you can inspire in them a feeling of trust that, look, even if we don't agree on every single policy position, you know that I will always fight for what is right for this country and for our families. That is what this is about. And I think that is what I'm trying to mobilize and to build and to lead. And I think when it comes to the two questions that matter the most in this race, one is who can beat Mike Lawler, and two, who can deliver for you on day one. When it comes to beating Mike Lawler, ladies and gentlemen, the new district coming out of 2021, it's no longer just 2 counties, it's 4. And 28% of registered voters are unaffiliated or independent. We cannot win this district with just Democratic voters alone anymore. It's just math. I think I can reach out and bring folks over in a way that Mike Lawler dreams he could. Look, Mike Lawler and I are about the same age. When 9/11 happened, I raised my hand and led America's sons and daughters in defense of this nation. He spent the last 20 years playing politics. I can't wait to make him eat that. And I will tell you, he has faced 2 Democratic politicians, former members of Congress, and he has beaten them. He has never faced someone like me. He has never faced a vet who has actually fought and delivered for this nation and our families. And I promise you, I will do that every single day if I have the privilege to be your representative. Because that's what this is about. It's about not who we're fighting against, but what we are fighting for. And I believe America's best days are still ahead of it. But we have to do the work to make that true. Because the path we are on today is not that path. And I don't believe more of the same is going to lead to different. I think it's time for different leaders, different people. Pass the torch, we're ready to fucking go, you know? So thank you for this, and thank you for caring.
And thank you for being here. for this evening, which is Effie Phillips-Staley. Which is Effie, sorry about that.
Hi, everyone.
Which is Effie Phillips-Staley. I'm going to review again the process so that she's reminded of what it will be. So you will have 2.5 minutes for an opening statement. You will have 2 minutes to answer the questions posed, and then at the end, you will have another 2.5 minutes for a closing statement. So at this time, your opening statement.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Effie Phillips-Staley. Let me adjust this mic a bit. Can you hear me okay? Great. I'm Effie Phillips-Staley, and I am running for Congress in New York's 17th District to fight for Hudson Valley working families and to help restore America as a beacon of democracy, opportunity, and progress. And for those of you who have heard me speak before, this is John Tomlin, who's working on my team. You know that I'm running in the progressive lane. And I'm running as a progressive in this moment because we need a bold vision for real government solutions to skyrocketing costs, to climate change, and to our democracy, which sadly is under siege. We need leaders who put people first, people and our lives first, and that is who I am. So I'm your neighbor. I live in Tarrytown, where I raised my children. Well, my daughter's 15, she's still at home. I'm also a trustee in the village of Tarrytown, where I fight for housing affordability, climate resilient infrastructure, and we just passed good cause eviction legislation, which is critical to help with the horrible cost of rent as it is these days. So I fight for people, and I always have, because I've been driven by a sense of justice and fairness. And this comes from decades of work in the nonprofit sector, where I advance missions to meet the needs of people, where I work hard to build trust with the people I serve, to build coalitions across communities, and most importantly, to deliver wins. But the sense of justice also comes from how I was raised, from my family. My mother, an immigrant from El Salvador, my father, a blue-collar veteran, and public schools, veterans benefit, housing that a family like mine could afford. These weren't handouts, these were the foundations of building the middle class. So what I'll fight in my last 30 seconds. I'm taking what's happening in government very personally right now, because what is happening is that Trump and Lawler are stripping away the foundations of what enables people to really, really thrive. So I, in Congress, am going to fight for the things that we need, and that is housing. We need 5 million new housing units across this nation, 66,000 in the district alone to lower housing costs, healthcare, immigration reform, and it's all called the Suburban Progress Agenda, which I'm happy to talk about today. Thanks.
Question number 1, tariffs on imported goods from small building materials to consumer products can drive up costs for families and small businesses. What is your position on current U.S. tariff policies, and how would you balance trade protections with the need to keep everyday goods affordable for your constituents?
So I'm going to answer that by speaking very broadly about my moral compass. And my moral compass, and what I believe the moral compass of government should be, is to take care of people and to enable people to thrive. That is not how the government is right now, and you can really see it in tariffs, in the tariffs policies that Trump is doing right now. It's not, his top line is getting whatever deal he can get, as if he is the expert, as if he knows more about tariffs than anyone else. And he's clearly not paying attention to how tariffs impact people's pocketbooks and small businesses as well. And that's the fundamental problem with the government right now, is they're not people-centered. They're not thinking, what are we doing to make the lives better of people who have to, like all of us, get affordable groceries, have affordable housing, small businesses and their goods, all of this. So the most critical change is having a government in power that prioritizes people, and then being able to take expert advice, not assume, as Trump does, that he is the only one who knows these things and should make these marvelous deals like he's the center of the universe, as we all know he is. And then having a Congress, this is so critical, that resists leaders like Trump, who push these, frankly, these narcissistic policies. I mean, when we look at farmers right now who are hurting so badly, the thought that we would charge higher tariffs on what they're selling and then use that money, which comes from us, okay, as we all know, and then use that money to somehow pay the farmers for their trouble. I mean, what kind of nonsense? It's actually nonsense. So holding the president accountable and having Congress act as it should to center people first.
Indian Point closed in 2021, leaving behind major infrastructure and economic potential. There are proposals to restart nuclear operations, introduce small modular reactors, or build large-scale battery storage. As our next representative, how would you approach the future of this site to ensure community safety, environmental integrity, and long-term economic benefit?
I think one of the most amazing things about Indian Point is that we know it's been a problem for a long time, but we also know it supplied so much of the energy for our region and for New York City. And yet the people spoke. It was too dangerous. It was a terrorist risk. You know, it's old, needed to be upgraded. And we as a nation need to pivot to different kinds of energy generating systems that are not as toxic, that aren't as harmful to us. And so when the people spoke and they wanted Indian Point to close, Indian Point was closed. But now we're in a challenging position because the Trump administration has dialed back all the funds that were made available to develop the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure of the future, energy infrastructure that actually is healthy for us and sustains all that we have to sustain as a nation. Of course, that goes without saying. So I would say what we have to do is really redirect our funds towards green energy. We're in an appalling place right now because Trump has taken away all of the infrastructure dollars that were committed to clean energy projects in the region. And it's like, whoops, we need energy. Oh, so let's direct it to Indian Point. It's almost like undermining Obamacare by killing subsidies for Medicaid. They couldn't get rid of it in the courts, right? So they had to find another way to do it. So in this case, it's like, oh, let's bring back this type of awful energy and, you know, by taking away the money we need to have better systems. So what I would do is turn back to the future and go for green energy again.
What have you done to help Democratic candidates in CD 17 or elsewhere to win in 2024, 23, and 22?
I love this question. So this is, since I was a teenager, since I first knocked on doors, it was for Bill Clinton, the first time he ran for president. So that gives you a sense of every election cycle in my life, in every place I've lived, this is what I've done. Because I had it in my head that, you know, women really hadn't had the chance to vote for that long. And it would be completely foolish if I didn't participate in the process, you know, to get people elected and to vote. So in recent years, my work has happened in two ways. Like one, as a trustee in the village of Tarrytown, I'm always knocking on doors, you know, either for my slate, because we run every 2 years, or for other candidates who are on the opposite cycle as us. So that's important. And then on the executive committee of Hispanic Democrats of Westchester, that is a critical thing that we do. 30,000 registered Hispanic Democrats in the district, only 4,000 vote. We absolutely have to knock on doors, be present, register people to vote. And here's the most important thing, like as an elected official, but also as a person who helps other candidates. We have to listen when we knock on the door. We have to knock on those doors more than 6 months out. We can't just go and knock and say, hey, vote, right? We have to know what people need, and we have to make sure that our policies reflect those needs as well. And so I can go through the list of candidates that I've knocked on doors for, and it would be very long. But the other thing I actually really like to do is talk to people who would like to run, because that's how I got started. I never thought that I would run for office until somebody came to me and said, you should be a trustee. And I thought, oh yeah, I should try that. And it was actually the same thing. I was asked to run for Congress. It wasn't on the top of my list. And I knew I had to step up and do it when I was asked.
Thank you. With the federal government facing a funding deadline at midnight on September 30, a failure to pass a continuing resolution could result in a government shutdown. Such a shutdown directly affects federal workers, some of whom the president is threatening to fire permanently, and disrupts services used by the public, from national parks to social programs and government processing. How would you vote on this issue? And how would you explain your decision to the workers and everyday citizens impacted by either a potential shutdown or a continuing resolution?
The challenge with the continuing resolution that I'm sure most are aware of is that by funding Trump's budget, we are enabling the most draconian policies to move forward, and we simply cannot. It is Trump who put us in the terrible position of having to choose between our democracy and these workers that you described, or having to choose between having available Medicaid and these workers that you're describing. He puts us in these positions, these two terrible choices, dares us to take one. I think that the only way to respond to him now, and I wish that this had happened during the last budget vote, is to absolutely flat out reject that choice. I would let government shut down now, because these choices are completely unacceptable, and he needs to feel the sting of what he has created if these are the choices that he has given to us. To me, it's that simple. I'll be honest, when Chuck Schumer sort of pushed it through last time, to me, that was such a capitulation, but a capitulation in the sense that he didn't recognize the danger that we're in. That by passing that budget, he gives a tyrant power. The #1 job of Congress right now is to take back power and to exercise its own power to check the executive branch. So I would just say flat out no, as painful as it is. And I remember the last government shutdown as well. I was working as the director of a small art museum, and we gave free admission to government workers, and lots of government workers came. There are things that we can do as a community, actually, and that's just one example, to really try to care for each other in these moments, but I think of it in this moment as an act of protest against an oppressive president.
Russia's war in Ukraine continues to reshape global security. NATO has pledged long-term support while also facing pressure to maintain unity and deterrence. As our next representative, how would you approach U.S. involvement in NATO and support for Ukraine? And what principles would guide your decisions on military aid, alliance, commitments, and diplomacy?
It is against international law to undermine the sovereignty of another nation. And this is absolutely what Russia has done. It was a criminal act, and it needs to be met with NATO, with a coalition, and it needs to be met forcefully. Not that I'm advocating for military action before diplomacy. Diplomacy is the most critical tool we have. Diplomacy over the long term. But Russia saw weakness in our government, weakness during the first Trump administration as our systems began to seem a little wobbly. We were the victims of, trolling, as you can think of Russian troll farms sort of undermining through our social media and having us turn on each other. And in this moment of weakness and lack of leadership in our nation, they took a great move at trying to rebuild their empire. It's a dangerous moment, but as a nation, we have to be very strong with other nations in terms of protecting each other's sovereignty. Otherwise, we see what we're seeing, sort of the shocking death, I don't even want to describe what's happening in so many places in the world. So staying strong, having good trade, being very strict about the weapons that we sell and how they are used. And when we have to, my dad said something wild. My dad was in the military. His way of thinking of Russia was like, you can never be weak with them. You always have to be super strong. And I think we have not been as strong as we need to be in that respect.
How much have you raised in support of your campaign? And how much of that money has been self-funded?
So I have raised $270,000, I believe, so far. And I have self-funded what I call seed money, $165,000 of that. But I will tell you about that money, because not everybody has $165,000 to seed their own campaign. But, and this is personal actually, and I've never said this to anyone, I won a lawsuit that I cannot describe in great detail against a person and an institution that victimized me. That was because of the legislation, what was it called? It was actually a wonderful thing that this state passed. It was the Adult Survivors Act. Because of this act, I was able to go back and hold an institution accountable for an immense wrong. And so this enabled me to have funds, and this is actually why I'm running for office, it's funny, to take what I was calling a sabbatical and focus on my local government work, which is a trustee in Tarrytown. Because when Trump won, I knew it was going to be bad. And I wanted to take some of this money that I got by fighting for justice, one of the hardest fights I've ever had, and then apply it to something good. So I took my sabbatical and I went to Hispanic Dems and said, it's going to be bad with Trump. What can I do as a local elected official in this moment? And they said, run for Congress. And that is not something that I was expecting, but I thought about it and I thought, excuse my language, but that son of a bitch in the office, that man has got to go. And if I could have any part of that, it's worth using some of this lawsuit money for. So that's how I funded everything.
Okay, here's the question for you specifically. How will you balance progressive ideals with pragmatic messaging to win swing voters in Rockland and Putnam?
That's a great question. I think about this a lot, and we discuss this a lot among my team, because we know that the term progressive has been weaponized, right? If we start first with these broad definitions, you know, the right has already created a category of what a progressive is, and you may have seen it in some of the attack ads that have come out against us so far. If I'm doing the job right, the policies that we create around affordability are going to work for everyone who needs that help, whether you're Hispanic or whether you're working class. Doesn't matter who you are, we're all being hurt by the economic policies of the Trump administration. And putting forward policies where government is working to help make things easier so that people can thrive, that's progressivism. That's it, not the free market, right? That doesn't always help, you know? Government has to play that role. And so, I'm trying to think, what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
In Rockland and Putnam.
In Rockland and Putnam, okay, so it's going back to my dad. High school education, blue collar guy. The most critical thing is making sure that we are addressing the needs of people's pocketbook issues. And if I'm doing it right, someone like my dad is going to look at me and say, okay, she gets it. So it's not about the cultural issues necessarily. It's not about all these other things. It's about how do we all live our best lives. But I will say this, equity and inclusion matters as well, because when you look at the Trump administration saying that English only is now the language here, and HUD takes down all languages but English, there are plenty of people with limited English who have a legal right to these resources who suddenly won't have it anymore. So we have to always take that into consideration too.
Mike Lawler has launched an aggressive social media campaign, promoting the budget bill's provisions, including imposing work requirements on Medicaid recipients, barring undocumented immigrants from, quote, ripping off New York taxpayers, increasing the child tax credit, and eliminating Social Security taxes for many, all framed as a way to address affordability concerns. How will your campaign strategically and decisively counter this narrative to expose its flaws and offer voters a compelling alternative?
Mike Lawler lives in an alternate reality of lies on social media. When Mike Lawler is in the world, were he in the world in a way where he paid attention to how people actually suffer, it would be a different universe. To win this campaign and to beat Mike Lawler, we have to be on the ground in the original social network, actually being in front of each other with people, hearing what their issues are, promising to take care of them in a way that's legitimate, because that's where we have the immense advantage over Mike Lawler. He lies, and he doesn't even lie that well. Like the most recent campaign that he did against us, he said that I was against the quadrupling of the SALT tax deduction. And so I posted that with a picture of myself holding a sign as he was driving by about how important the SALT tax is. It's like they didn't even do their opposition research to find a reason to lie, right? So I think that is the truth, is to be constantly truth-telling to people, in front of people, and really hearing them, because it doesn't matter what he says, people are suffering. People's own suffering should hopefully break through the propaganda that most people are exposed to. Maybe not everyone, but when people are suffering, we have to be there, and that's something that the Democratic Party hasn't done very well in the last few cycles. So we really need to be better about making sure that we actually listen to people, not the donor class, not the lobbyists, but to people directly in their needs, because the working class was ours to lose, and the party lost it, which is why we need a completely new playbook, one that really centers people.
Thank you. Now is your opportunity for a closing statement.
I think that went a lot faster than I thought. So this campaign is really about us, the people of the Hudson Valley, demanding a government that finally puts working families ahead of the ultra-rich and political insiders. So I'm not running to write strongly worded letters. I'm running to fight and to win for you. And here's what I'll fight for. Housing. As I said, this nation needs 5 million new housing units, 66,000 here in New York 17 alone to stabilize costs. Medicare as a public option, because healthcare is a human right. Universal childcare, real housing affordability, as I said, right here in the Hudson Valley. We built the suburban progress agenda that addresses all of these issues by looking at people's budgets and asking, where are the places where people need help? That is the basis of what we are fighting for. And of course, we need to fight for climate resilience. We can't have our heads in the sand about the trajectory of our planet in terms of climate. So I know what it means when public education, veterans benefits, affordable housing, and healthcare transforms lives, because they lifted my family into the middle class. That's what built America. That's what civil rights leaders fought for. So opportunity isn't reserved for just some of us. Trump and Mike Lawler are ripping this away, and it has to stop now. So this is our moment to stand tall, to throw out the failing DNC playbook, which it has been, and to listen to the people, not the systems of power. When we organize, when we fight, and when we imagine and deliver a bold future where all of us can thrive, we cannot lose. So I want to thank you so much for being here tonight, for listening to what I have to say. And of course, I know we're all going to be in this fight for a while. So I look forward to getting this done together. So thank you.
Thank you to all our candidates wherever you are, and to the audience here, and to those on Zoom, and our evening is now concluded.